All right, all right, all right. Another episode here of Mountaineer Report, made possible by West Virginia Sports Now and available everywhere you get your podcasts. Mike Osti here, going to be joined in a moment by my co-host Luke Blaine. And you probably know what we're going to talk about now. West Virginia basketball's bubble likely popped with their home quad 3 loss to Utah. Utah's first true road victory in over 300 days. As insane as that was, Luke was there on location covering that debacle for the Mountaineers. And we also will touch on some recent news surrounding the football program and if this is a big deal or if not a big deal. We will certainly preview spring ball that is coming up in the next couple weeks, certainly as we get into March, and we will then talk about whatever ends up being West Virginia's fate and how to fully equate this year and if there's a postseason at all whenever that's fully decided. But for the purpose of this show, Luke, we're going to touch on the recent disaster because this team appeared to be on the right side of the bubble, if not at least on the bubble. Going into that Utah game, their metrics had improved. It looked like that if they did enough the rest of the season, maybe even had that loss to Utah, or not Utah, but BYU still happen. Beat Utah, of course, win those other games, do something in the tournament, win 20 games. Maybe they could get in there. They were improving their position, and then they just lay an egg, a dud early on in the game, down big early on. They then come back like they've been doing in recent games at the Undertaker there. They're never out of a game. And then the final minute was just the embodiment of how horrible the entire game was for West Virginia. And Hodge, for the most part, is usually calm, cool, and collected on the sideline there. He's yelled a time or two, certainly after some big wins usually. But in that moment, it looked like he maybe was the angriest he's ever been at his team. And now it does appear that West Virginia's season is probably over, even though as we're speaking here on Thursday, February 19th. We're doing this live, of course, and all of these episodes, as well as this one, will be available podcast-wise. It looks like now their bubble has been popped. So, not to burst anyone's bubble tuning in here, but Luke, is that your estimation here, that this team's bubble has popped, and kind of what the hell happened there?
Yeah, I think pending any kind of big run in the Big 12 tournament, I can't put WVU in the tournament picture right now. And
Yeah.
even if they win out the rest of this year, I don't know if they'll have enough quality wins to make up for the sub-quality losses that they've had. I mean, they've
That's
really
fair.
dug themselves into a hole here, and it's kind of a microcosm of their games, honestly, or the games are a microcosm of the season. You get in a bad hole early, and it's looking more like the Utah game right now than it is UCF on the road. So I'm just really, I was pretty shocked because that game against Utah, I'm confident in saying that the first half is the worst that they've looked all season. I mean, they went down 2-18. Hodge called a timeout early. I
Yeah.
mean, you had some turnovers. Jasper Floyd walked before even crossing half court against no pressure at all. It's just there's too many of those mistakes that,
Yeah.
the teams that are going to be in March aren't making those.
And you shouldn't be. I mean, we
No.
talked about on our last show, which was leading up into that game several days before, that not only had they improved their positioning, but they were also playing better. And Huff and Eagle Staff and Jasper Floyd, they were talking about it. They seemed to be feeling like they were playing better and more of a team. And Ross Hodge, in his Zoom with us, talked about how he felt like the team was finally playing better. And obviously, it doesn't excuse losing to Clemson, doesn't excuse blowing it against Ohio State. Those were winnable games. Those were opportunities to pick up quality wins out of conference play that the team had last year. The program had, obviously not this group, but the program had last year and still didn't make it with a lot more quad one wins on the board. And when you don't have those opportunities that go your way in the non-con and you kind of get through the non-con with just the wins you were supposed to have, yeah, you have the win over Kansas. You don't have enough quality wins in then the conference, even though you're really playing quality teams every single night, but it's hot and cold for a while. But it felt like they were finally hitting their stride. They had some big wins, even if they're not, quad one wins for the metrics in comeback victories. And able to sweep Cincinnati, able to beat UCF, who has been a metrics darling and a still better position than them on the analytics after being down so big. So it felt like maybe they would do the same thing, but you're at home, you're not on the road. It almost felt, Luke, like they kind of maybe relished in this us against the world mentality on the road, but at home, I don't know if they got too comfortable or they were feeling themselves too much, or maybe they saw Lenardi put them on the bubble, or they heard shows like this, or they looked at the fact that they had these comeback wins and they're never out of a game. Maybe they got too comfortable too early in that game and felt like, hey, we're still going to come back. They had that vibe throughout, but then Utah, to their credit, despite a horrible year that they're dealing with, never gave up and they kept their pedal to the metal and they won. So it's not so much that the loss is really, really bad, and it is, but I think fans would have felt better if that type of bad loss hurt you and was on your resume earlier in the season than to happen now after getting on the bubble, moving from considered, at least for Lenardi, moving up in the metrics and having comeback wins and it looking like you're playing better. They were starting to give a vibe like they were a deserving March NCAA tournament team with those comeback wins. That was what even people around the country were saying. The national media, other coaches were all saying that, hey, watch out for the Mountaineers. They could sneak up and maybe even win a game in the NCAA tournament. And then after the Utah game, I don't know if anyone's going to predict they win any more games the rest of the year. Now, obviously, they're going to win some the rest of the year, but I wouldn't be surprised with any result the rest of this season.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, and you were talking about how they never really got into that game. I mean, Honor Huff's answer to that question as to, the bad start for the Mountaineers was that, they have a habit of trying to feel out the games
Yeah.
and things like
Like,
I don't know. I don't know, like, and I
it's
don't mean to say
we're in
this.
February. We're in
I don't. Yeah,
mid-February, right?
I
Like,
don't mean to say this to slight him, but
you hear that in November.
if you as a team are trying to feel out the game and see what the opponent's bringing to the table before you really start to kick it into gear, you're going to
Yeah.
find yourself behind the eight ball like they so consistently have this season.
Yeah.
And they're just, they're not performing early. They're digging themselves into a hole. They're having to rely on their defense turning into offense eventually down the line as the game goes on. And it's just not working. I mean, it has worked at times. You've had some miracle comebacks, but
Yeah.
right now it is not working in their favor. And the like Utah just brought the intensity across the board. They were guarding the perimeter better. I
Yeah.
mean, I think the biggest show of the game was the way they played in the front court. Utah did. I mean, James Okonkwo came in and flat out outplayed anybody that WVU tried to match up against him at the five position.
Yeah.
And I mean, he's 4 inches shorter than Harlan Obioha, and
Yeah. Yeah.
it wasn't working. The only player that
Size
I
has been
really
brought up as an issue for West
yeah
Virginia, despite a few guys. DJ Thomas and Obioha were really the only guys who had size this year, and they're not even the tallest in the world for the conference. But
yeah
yet, somebody even shorter than Obioha ends up roughing him up in maybe the death
yeah
knell game. Yeah, that's another thing. I mean, that is a point there that we talked earlier in the season. Does size matter? And Ross Hodge even admitted that size matters, and maybe would be their Achilles heel this year. Their two bigs are still small in comparison to bigs for dominant teams like the Houstons and Texas Techs. And we've seen, Luke, that because of their size disadvantage, that unless Obioha plays above himself, same thing with Thomas or even others, unless the guards get more rebounds than normal, that they can get blown out in games. I mean, against the top teams, they got destroyed. Iowa State, Houston, Arizona. And yet, you can't really blame that for this game because it's not like Utah is towering over everybody. Now, they were winning the rebounding battle. They were seemingly winning all the loose balls, which Hodge brought up in those prior comebacks, that's an issue. He brought up in the Baylor game that, hey, I'm disappointed because if we won these loose balls, things would have been better. And loose balls has been an issue for them recently, despite the comeback wins. But that was evident again against Utah. And really, to tie it all together, again, Luke Blaine, Mike Osta here, Mountaineer Report, West Virginia Sports Now. And we're talking about West Virginia's bubble likely being popped with that loss to Utah the other night. It feels like that Utah wanted the win more. And it's weird because Utah is not going to the NCAA tournament, even if they would have won the game by 40. They could win out, and they're not going to the NCAA tournament. Their only chance is if they win, roll through the conference tournament and get there. But They're not going to be there in all reality. West Virginia had a lot to play for, and they were at home. And I also know that this was said by some that this happens every year. They always have this weird scheduling glitch around this time where they have a random game that ends up tipping off at 8:30 or 9 p.m., even if it's home, and they have trouble getting fans there because that's just a weird inconvenience, obviously, for an East Coast team, despite being in a conference that's spread out all over the country. But I don't want to hear that. Like, you had everything to play for. You're the better team. You're the more talented team. You were playing better in the recent games. And the other issue is, which I want to get to now, yeah, they started out slow. They did come back. They did almost still win that game. And it kind of felt like for a while in the second half that maybe Utah was going to blow it because they would have moments where momentum would shift. And West Virginia kind of did, they do this thing where they huddle all of us, like just every time there's a bad momentum break, they all huddle away from Hodge, which is what he wanted. He mentioned earlier in the season that he would huddle with them. He would bring them over to the sideline early in the year, if you remember back from the brawl and those moments. And then after they started having some comeback wins, they got to conference tournament or conference play, they got to the new year. He even would vocally say, you're going to see a lot more of them huddling together. I think they got this now. I would get back in the huddle if I'm Hodge here, the last 5 games of the year. But nonetheless, they were doing those group huddles away from the coaching staff. And every time they would do one of those, it kind of felt watching like, okay, maybe they're going to swing this. They don't feel like they're as nervous as even the fan base is. Maybe they'll be fine. They just came back and did this a couple nights earlier. However, again, Utah never gave up. And then the final minute of that game, especially the final possession of that game in that final seconds, was stuff that looks like an incredibly inexperienced team. And as much as Hodges talked about that, yeah, we're a transfer group, but so are many teams in the country. We had a lot of experience. We played a lot of basketball collectively amongst us, even if not together. It's 8, so months of a season here, and we're most of the way through. What do you think happened there in that final possession? And how do you think Hodge feels about that? I know he did mention that a little bit, and we're talking about that a little bit after the game, but they still could have won this game as bad as they played.
Yeah, they absolutely had a chance. I mean, they were absolutely still in it there at the end. I mean, they were probably in it a little bit longer than they deserved to be. I mean, you had
Yeah.
the 2 missed
Yeah.
free throws by Utah,
Sure.
and then they have to go the length of the court the other way, and of course, you have the errant pass. Now, the explanation we got from Hodge is that Jasper Floyd gets the rebound. He told him look up the right side for Honor Huff. Now, whenever they're running up the court, Trayson Eaglestaff is like in between Honor and Jasper Floyd. So Honor backs off so he can try to get the pass and with Trayson not being in the way. And then Jasper Floyd throws it up the right side wing anyway. So
Yeah.
it was just an all around miscommunication and kind of a bang bang play there. But I mean, I don't know. And I mean that is just kind of like the average Mountaineer fan will look at that play and be like, yeah, that checks out.
Right.
And because that's just something that's happened. But I think that you can look at that play all you want, but you had 39 and a half more minutes before that to put yourself
Yeah.
in a position where you didn't need to be there. And that's a position, and that is a result of the bad start. And I just think the
Yep.
bad starts have been the problem for this team all along. And it's like, yeah, it's a fun thing whenever they come back and win and they come back and flip the tables and they come back and, are still winning in the top half of the Big 12. But that's just not the position they're in right now.
Yeah. And I could maybe see that play, but again, this is a player that's been around the block. He's been in those moments before. This team has had to come back and do that before. It didn't go well against Ohio State. It did go well in recent games. It obviously did not go well against Utah, where they're fighting for their lives in the final minute, final 30 seconds of a game. And it couldn't have went worse. I mean, it really couldn't have went worse. And yeah, the average Mountaineer fan will say that just checks out as a regular WVU thing to do, blow it down the stretch when things are in front of you. But these players haven't been around WVU all their lives. Ross Hodge is not from West Virginia. There's no connection there outside of Ren Baker. I don't know how that could befall them. Like, that was a weird turn of events. But as you put it, that one play is not why they lost the game. They lost the game because they were awful in the first 10 minutes of that game. They waited way too long to get going. They then picked it up in the second half, but it was too late then. And they faced a team that was really, really hungry to get a road win and upset somebody. And they ended up being the victim rather than doing it to other people. And maybe they felt themselves too much. I don't know what it is. I can't get in their heads, but that was a horrible effort, a horrible game, and at a horrible time, really, in the year. And it does look like that even if they would win out, and that would include a ranked win over BYU and a quad one win there, only would be their second of the year. Like, last year's team had 6 quad one wins and didn't get in. And I do think last year's team should have got in, but 2 is hard to argue, even if you have 20 wins. I mean, the overall win total doesn't mean as much in college basketball anymore. We're in a metrics age, Luke. I mean, you look at what's going on with Miami, Ohio. They could end up with a 30-win season here undefeated, and they might not make the tournament unless they run through their conference tournament, because they literally are 0-0 in quad one games. They don't have any on the board. They really have only played, I think, 1 or 2 quad two games their entire season. So when you have easy games, it's hard to win that many in a row. But when you have an easy schedule and easy games in front of you, the metrics don't care. KenPom doesn't care. The net doesn't care. The committee doesn't care about those. Those don't do much for you. So I guess, do you think there's anything they can do down the stretch now to save this and make a run? I mean, 5 in a row would still be 5 in a row. It would include a ranked win. Then maybe if they do something in the conference tournament, could that maybe move things with what you're seeing around the country? Do they basically have to win the Big 12 tournament now for you to get in? Is there any Dumb and Dumber movie quote here of you're saying there's a chance? Is there any reason to say that? Or are you telling fans to not even check in anymore, obviously? Like, what could be in front of this team now? That was a really bad loss, though.
I I just don't know if, say you go 5-0 to end the regular season.
Yeah.
If you go 5-0 to end the regular season, I still don't know if you'll have enough quality wins to outweigh the Clemson loss, the Xavier loss, the uh,
Yeah.
Wake Forest, and then this one. I mean, the best win of your season is Kansas, which is a really
Yeah.
good win,
100%.
but you just don't. I don't know if you have enough of a
What's
supporting
another
cast
one?
around that win
How many
to.
quality wins do you have besides Kansas? I mean, you could argue these comeback wins over Cincinnati and UCF, but those are,
Yeah,
I mean, Cincinnati has a coach that literally goes viral freaking out after every single game they play. Like, it's not like their program's riding high, and UCF is very much on the bubble. So if
yeah,
West Virginia beats them at home, they're probably knocked out despite having the best year they've had in a decade. So
yeah,
it's not like, again, if you had the Clemson win and the Ohio State win, I think you're probably flirting with maybe winning out and you would still get in. I
yeah,
think that even in that scenario, that you still wouldn't be great off the Utah loss. Like, you would not be sitting pretty, but maybe you would have been on the bubble before that game, and maybe now you would be in that first 4 out or something. Like, you'd be on the wrong side of the bubble, but before it, you would have been on the right side of the bubble instead of just on the bubble, if that makes any sense. And now maybe you'd have a chance, especially with a BYU win and doing something in the tournament. But now, even winning out, that would include a ranked win. I mean, maybe if you get to the championship game and lose to a top 10 team, then maybe I could see a bone being thrown your way and you crawl in. There could be something made of that. If it's a judgment call, maybe they do get something thrown their way because the program was screwed a year ago. That has been flirted and said by some in the national media that maybe that would go down. It's not like there's that many giant, dominant juggernaut teams this year. It's a lot of teams with resumes that are flawed. The bubble's full of teams with resumes that are flawed. That was part of why they should have got in last year, that a lot of teams had resumes that were flawed and theirs were better than a lot of teams. But this year's team resume is not better. I mean, Huggins' team got in 23 with 19 wins because they had a lot of metric victories. They had quality wins. They did a lot in non-conference play. Last year's team had 3 top 10 wins, for crying out loud. They didn't even do that in the Final Four year with Huggins in 2010. This year's team has the Kansas win, the emotional victory of beating Pitt, but guys, if you've tuned out on Pitt, check in what they're doing. Look up their box scores. Look up what their record is. It's a horrendous year for Pitt. That's not a quality win at all anymore for anyone outside of maybe the emotions of WVU fans. And the other wins that are big or mean something maybe at the time, They just don't mean as much as they did then. Now, if you beat Utah and you keep on it moving, maybe that okay, you can impress people by saying, okay, you're playing better now. You had to gel together. You were close against OSU and Clemson. You didn't win, but okay, no big deal. You slide in as a 10 seed or something if you win a game or two and you do something in the Big 12 tournament. Now, unless you really maybe dominate BYU, maybe you beat BYU by 10 or 15 points. Like maybe you got to be impressive in some of these wins, and maybe that will do it for you. And Luke Blaine here, Mike Austin, Mountaineer Report, and yeah, we have somebody here in our live chat, even though we are mostly going to post this archive, asking if this team choked. I mean, if you would characterize this as a choke job year, and I guess this is going to pivot into what I want to ask here. And we're going to talk about this more on future shows once we have this season really under wraps, but this is year one for Ross Hodge. This is only his third year as a Division I head coach, which again was my criticism of hiring him in the first place because there was pressure to make the tournament. He only had 2 years under his belt prior to this at North Texas. That pressure is not close to West Virginia, but nonetheless, he's a younger coach. This is year one for him. It's a full-on transfer roster. They were players that a lot of other power programs wanted, but yet the roster clearly is flawed. And it takes time to gel and all of that. You do have a big win, at least one. Maybe you get to 20 wins on the board. You're in the conversation. You're on the bubble. You're at least a relevant team all year. But yet, it's your own fault with some missed opportunities that you're likely going to miss the NCAA tournament. And that is the standard that Ren Baker even said at the intro presser that we expect to get in the tournament every year. That is our bar. And then once there, who knows? But we do want to get in. We're not just going to punt years. How would you characterize this year? Is this a successful year? Is this still a bad year because it's below the program expectation? Do you give a mulligan for Ross Hodge having it be year one? How do you view this thing since now it appears they've blown an opportunity to play through March?
Well, I think the biggest way to characterize it is, like you said, missed opportunities. I think
Yeah,
that that's a huge, like you look back at previous games. I mean, I mentioned it. The Ohio State was a big one. Clemson was a big one.
yeah,
Uh, Xavier was one that you were never really in, honestly, the whole way through.
yeah.
And it's, just all these things pile up. And I think that it's one of those things where you get to the off season and you say, why did that happen? And I can give you my best guess, and it's
Sure.
because of the offensive execution. The
Yeah.
offense has just not been good this season. It just hasn't.
Not been
And
good
the
enough, not
defense
been
is
consistent enough. 100%.
no,
Yeah.
not at all. And I'm a fan of the defensive mindset. I do like it,
Yeah.
but you have to. I've seen people float around the idea of hiring somebody to manage
I've
the
seen that.
offense. I think that would be a very good move. I think
Right.
trying to instill a defensive identity and create an offense that's successful and consistent is a really hard one-man job. And
Yeah.
and I'm not
Yeah.
saying Ross Hodge can't do it. I'm just saying it's not working this season. And maybe he learns from this season, maybe he puts it together, but I do remember he said the exact quote that they had to root their identity in defense this season because they have so many new players. Well, assuming Jackson Field, like if Jackson Fields doesn't get this medical red shirt, let's
Yeah.
say, you're going to graduate 7 seniors, and then
Same thing
you're
again.
gonna have to try to keep Amir Jenkins and DJ Thomas around in the portal, and then
Yeah.
I mean, you have freshmen who are probably slightly familiar with the season or with the system coming in.
Yeah. Sadler's one. I
You're
mean,
gonna find
yeah.
yourself in a very similar position next
Yeah.
year with a bunch of new players in key positions. I think you have to find somebody who can manage the offense in the offseason. But in terms of the season as a whole, I don't think it's a failure. I think it's honestly it's encouraging. I think it should be seen as encouraging because they had the so many opportunities. They went out there and they took care of business
Okay.
against teams that they should have taken care of business against in the non-conference. You saw some missed opportunities, but it's not like you're like I mean, like you said, Ross Hodge is a young coach, and maybe he's not been in too many of those positions as a Division I head coach. And as much as this team will need time to grow, I think he will as a head coach as well, which is not what you want to hear as a fan. You want to have your guy that you can depend on
Yeah, that's the thing.
immediately,
Right.
but I just don't know if Ross Hodge is right there yet. And like we talk about clock management, game management. He had a timeout in that situation, and I think he said that he should have called it. And that's the second, at least the second time this season that we've heard that. And not meant to be extremely critical of Ross Hodge, but I think that's just a sign that there's growing to do at the head coach
Yeah,
position, as
100%.
much as there is any other position on this team.
And the weird thing is, and I think this is a little bit of Neil Brown's downfall too, certainly with the fans. And obviously, he didn't win enough and had to go. But Ross Hodge, and this is why some compare them a little bit, which obviously is not what any Mountaineer fan would want to hear. Ross Hodge is almost honest to a fault. It's almost too much. And obviously, a journalist, I want him to be honest. We want him to be honest. I'm not going to tell him, well, I guess I am, but I'm not going to tell him to not be as honest. I like candor. I like honesty. But with that said, if you compare that to Bob Huggins, for example, whether it's early in his career or at the end, if you look at film, I mean, I'm not going to say he would lie out there in pressers, but he would try to send messages. He was surly at times. He would beat around the bush. He kind of would be vague. He would, maybe throw it back on somebody else. He would take ownership for sure. I'm not saying he wouldn't, but he would never sit there and tell you, even if it's a year that he maybe in the back of his mind didn't think they're going to go ahead and go to the Final Four, that, hey, this is a rebuilding process. We got to take this step. We got to do this. Like, we're learning as we go. We're not going to be ready yet. I knew it would take us months. All those things, like, that's song and dance. And that's what Neil Brown did. He was very, very honest about, hey, this will be a process. Here's the win bar I see. Here's what we could do with this X number of dollars, in comparison to, say, Rich Rod, who will come out there and say, I'm not messing around. If you don't want to go ahead and win a natty, get out of town. Like, it doesn't mean that it's accurate to occur right away. Obviously, that team went 4-8 on the football side, and sometimes you got to take things with a grain of salt. But I can kind of get the fans who, even if they like Ross Hodge as a guy, and maybe even if they believe in him, and I'm not saying I don't, I do believe he actually could be the right man for this job, and I do think he's a great coach, and he is a great guy. But when you hear him continuously maybe go out there in the post-game presser and say, yep, on me, messed up, should have called that timeout, and you're sitting there as a fan thinking, we're in mid-February, man. We're in mid-February. This is a Big 12 school. This is a Power 4 school. This is a historic program. This is not your first job. You can't just be making the same mistakes, losing a big game, and then throwing it on yourself. And I'm not saying it's better if he would shy away. It's great that he puts it on himself. But I can kind of get why fans are a little bit annoyed now. Obviously, he's not going anywhere. They're not going to fire him. He could have never won a game this year, and Ren Baker was not going to fire him after year one. They've had 4 coaches in 4 years. This guy wants to stay. He wants to build. He is a good coach. He runs a system that can win in this conference. It's proven around the country and in this conference that it can win. Yeah, things need to change, but to win 20 games or almost get to 20 games or flirt with the tournament in year one, and honestly, even what DeVries did, we went from 9 to 19 wins in year one. That was a big deal. This is just as good, really, off of that, because that team didn't make it either. It's a similar coaching job that DeVries did, and if it wasn't for that drama in his exit, he wasn't getting fired either. So Ross Hodge is going nowhere, and I don't even think he should, but I could kind of get the annoyance there of some of those answers and kind of what you're saying, that, yeah, put it on me. Well, I get you want to put it on you and not put it on the players, but again, we're in mid-March. You were on the right side of Lenardi's map. You were at least on the bubble, which is where you want to be. Maybe you would have been on the wrong side of that bubble, but you were at least there. It was better than where you were a couple days before. And then it does feel like either a choke job, a missed opportunity, a young team that wasn't ready for the moment. I don't know what it was, because, again, this didn't happen in November. This is happening in February. I think if Ross is saying that in November, as he did then, you can take it a little bit more. But to hear it again in February, late February, it's just rough. But again, he's obviously going nowhere. Luke Blaine, Mike Oster here, Mountaineer Report, as West Virginia's bubble likely popped with that loss to Utah. A home loss, again, a quad 3 home loss. You could even argue it could have been a quad 4 game. I mean, if you want to argue how good or bad Utah is, calling it quad 3 is almost
Might be by
generous.
the end of the year.
I mean, at the end of the year, it could flip to that. Yeah, that's what it was said on the broadcast. Maybe it's going to be a quad 4 game. I mean, again, that was Utah's first road win, true road win in 300 plus days. So I think it was like 320 some. It just doesn't look good. They were down so big early. And again, they don't have enough of an offense to come back from that all the time. And, it does lean me to, and Eagle Staff's had a roller coaster ride of a season. I mean, so bad in non-con that he ended up becoming a hero in some games. People started feeling really good about him. He was laughing it off. He kind of gave a vibe that, hey, I put that behind me. I'm going to kick it into gear and be what I was last year. He's not been nearly the player that they thought they recruited, but he still was a really productive player and been good for them, kind of an undercard to Huff in some of their wins. Any thoughts on kind of what's happened to him the last couple games now? Because it also appeared in that Utah game that they even mentioned it too, that he was just kind of chucking up shots that were not quality shots. And it's what I talked about before the game on our last show, that when they have a cold spurt, they then chuck really bad shots and they make it worse. And that was done by no one more than Eagle Staff in that first half. Is this just him that he's going to just be this roller coaster that 1 month he maybe is one of the best shooters in the country, the next month he's just shooting shots for like he's Steph Curry out there and missing them all? That feels like what we're getting from Eagle Staff now, almost to the end of the year.
Well, I think the thing is like I think we forget that he has the ability to make them too.
He does,
Like
yes.
he's very capable of making them. And I don't know what it is about this year. Maybe it is just a West Virginia curse or something like that. But
I mean,
he obviously
yeah.
has not been the player this season that the team was expecting and that the team needed. And
Yeah, averaging
and
9.9 points per game. And by the way, Utah 9 points, UCF 8, 5, 3, 9, 12, 10. Then you're getting into that in January 12, 10, 23, 22. In February, 3, 5, 8, 9. Like, again, I could do that with every month. It is every other month with him.
yeah, it's just, and I think that there is something to be said about the offense and the lack of good shots. And there's not many good shots being created. There's not
Yeah.
much off ball movement going on in the offense. And that's a problem. That's something like these Big 12 defenses are too good to just have an off ball screen, something like that, or an on ball screen pick and roll. That's going to run out eventually. And whenever they do get into their offensive sets and try to make something happen, something good usually does happen.
Yeah,
I
yeah, there's
mean,
talent there. Yeah.
Jasper Floyd made a good layup in this game. I
Yeah.
love the plays whenever Honor Huff sets a down screen for Harlan Obioha. I think that's cool. That's creative. They need to do more of that. But there's just not enough happening whenever they don't have just the specific offensive play called in order to make something happen.
Yeah. And the weirdest part, too, is for me, these players, not to the Big 12 level, West Virginia level, like this, but, and I've already seen, people talking about that in the chat. Maybe is it too much for these players? A lot of them are from smaller schools. And of course, they all were from smaller schools. But they've been in big moments. They've been in big games. They've won. Ross Hodge told me to my face at a bar in Pittsburgh over the summer before the season, I get some criticizing these players because they're not all Power 4 transfers. Again, as I said then and I will say now, there are power schools that wanted these kids. They were not just going to West Virginia or group or mid-majors, group of five, whatever you want to call them. Obviously, for basketball, it's a mid-major situation. It was not either WVU or mid-major for some of these kids. They had other major conference opportunities. They were coveted by other schools, and they chose West Virginia for whatever, for Hod, for money, for whatever, Big 12. But it does look like he said they were winners and he wanted them because they're winners and they know how to handle big moments. It doesn't appear like they do. Like, I mean, they've handled some well, but when you go to this game, certainly the Utah game, it did not appear that they could handle a big moment. They did come back, so that's something for them for sure. And they've galvanized and had comebacks and had recent games that it worked out. But you cannot start games so sluggish and just throwing up bad shots left and right. I don't care who you're playing, and expect to turn that around all the time. Their luck ran out, and maybe that popped their bubble for the season. And to me, and this is what I said on social media right after the game, year one, a full-on transfer roster, a young head coach that I probably criticize him more than anybody else in WVU media when he got hired, and I've kind of come around to I believe he could be the guy. I do think he's a good coach and a good guy, and I don't think this is a Neil Brown thing. I think he's a good coach that can win at a high level in the Big 12 in college basketball. I think his mentality and his system is right, and I think he needs more offense, more offensive talent. Maybe you got to sprinkle in a Javon Small who's been at a major school before, even if other conference teams wanted those players. You need maybe that guy. You need that Javon Small maybe on your team, even if the rest of them are from mid majors, maybe that you're elevating. And I do love the idea, especially there's no salary cap here. I know you have so much money for the roster, no matter how much more is there. There's obviously going to be so much you can give, but I mean, we'll get to football here in a moment, but we've seen, Luke, Rich Rod's football staff is bigger than any staff he's had in 30 years of a borderline Hall of Fame career. And they're doing it on purpose. And that's why it does maybe hurt to lose who they've lost. We'll get to here in a moment. They are getting specialty coaches. They're coaching. They have more coaches that I think fans could even keep track of on the football team. Whereas basketball is just kind of the regular run-of-the-mill guys that he brought over from North Texas. Maybe they need a legit offensive coordinator, honestly, type of coach. Maybe that's what they need. Somebody that is all they're doing, that their job is to figure out how to offensively scheme this team. Don't talk to them about defense. Don't talk to them about discipline anybody. Don't talk to them about, anything else. Like their job is for offense. Maybe that's what they do need. Maybe they do need that guy. That would make me feel better about the prospects of the team in the future. But we've already seen high school recruiting be sound. We've already seen Sadler as a 5-star come aboard and commit, and that being a gigantic deal and sign. I mean, unless that changes, recruiting so far for next year is already going well, at least in the high school side. We'll see what happens with the portal. I have no reason to believe he's not going to recruit well. I think he needs to recruit better, obviously, and they need more ready players because, as I said to him at the intro presser, it's not Ross Hodges' fault that Josh Eiler led arguably the worst season in program history, if not the worst, the second to worst. It's not Ross Hodges' fault that Bob Huggins took a Hall of Fame career and then had it end so poorly and had that end before anybody wanted it to end. It's not Ross Hodges' fault that Darren DeVries, who led a 10-win turnaround in a team that should have made the tournament, and then left in drama. None of that's on Hodge. However, there is a history to West Virginia basketball. There is a lineage there. There are legendary names there. 31 NCAA tournament appearances is a bar, and I could go down the rest of how far they've been in those tournaments and what they've done. I mean, you look at the big banners at the Coliseum. We have a picture up on the site. You can't have all that and then continuously miss the tournament, especially when you're saying that you can compete in this era. And we've seen solid recruiting. Hodge is there. So, yeah, at the time I thought that maybe they should have brought in a more experienced coach for a situation that should have been win now with pressure. But now he has a year under his belt. Now he knows what he messed up on. I think he will course correct. I think he will get better as the years go. I think now he's more ready for this opportunity than he would have been a year ago. And I do think if they make some minor tweaks, they could certainly get themselves in the dance at minimum. I would think it'd be fair to predict that maybe next year would be a tournament year. But I also will add here, next year has to be a tournament year. At this point, it's now fair to say has to. Like this year going in was, okay, if they make the tournament, great. Everything is not on Hodge. So it's a hope or a want to make the tournament. Just be in the conversation, give hope for the future. Okay. I think it's a good year right now. It's not a great year. I don't want to call it a bad year because, again, maybe they win 20 games, but the program hasn't done in a while. It is year one of this. You cannot expect to go to the Final Four in year one all the time. Year two, though, it's you got to be there. You got to get in. And I'm not, obviously a year in advance. I'm not saying if you don't get there, you're firing the man, or I don't know what will go on around the country or to evaluate that season yet. But I think it's fair to say if you miss this year, the cushion's gone. You got to get in next year. If that means spending more money on the players, finding more money, if that means it may be swallowing your pride because maybe Hodge is thinking, well, okay, Kelvin Sampson's a defensive minded guy. He went to a championship game off of defense. He doesn't have an offensive coordinator. He did it on his own. I'm going to be him younger. I'm my mentor, Texas Tech, younger. I'm going to be them younger. I don't need all these other cooks in the kitchen. Maybe you got to swallow your pride and bring that guy in for at least a year and see how it goes. I don't know. If it doesn't go well, you fire him mid-season. You do that. Like it'll got to be a have to. Like it's a must. You have to be there in the NCAA tournament at this point next year. If you're on the bubble, you got to end up in the right side of the bubble. Like you just got to get there at some point. You got to figure that out. Luke Blaine, Mike Osta here, Mountaineer Report. Again, available everywhere you get your podcasts, available throughout our West Virginia Sports Now network, and of course here on YouTube. Now to pivot, as I kind of mentioned, we're talking about adding to the coaching staff for Ross Hodge. Well, Rich Rodriguez, off of a disappointing 4-8 season in year one with a lot of hype. Now, he dealt with a lot of injuries. There's reason to believe off recruiting and now more money being there, they should be better certainly in year two. We'll see what actually ends up happening. And part of that is he was willing to not only bring in the staff that he brought in for year one, but willing to tweak it again. I mean, we see Rick Trickett come aboard that was not there the year earlier that everybody wanted. He now comes aboard. We see Castile retire and end that. We see now even bringing in a coach that was just going to specialize in the pass rush in Larry Knight. The pass rush was a problem last year. Even the transfers they brought in that never really clicked enough. He was going to pay somebody to just do that. Just do that. And Larry Knight is there. And just off the announcement to the departure, I know from even breaking the story that he was there about 2 weeks before the announcement, by the way. But just on the announcement to the departure, 36 days. Does not even get to spring ball. He gets poached by, nobody would deny, a bigger time program in Georgia. And they have pressure to kick it into gear again as well. They were in the playoff, but they didn't advance. They didn't go far enough. Now they're going to be willing to swallow some pride and get specialized. He's going to do the same thing for them that he was going to do for West Virginia. He's from Georgia, though. He is going home, but still, that stings. We've yet to see an announcement on or even a report from anybody on who they're going to replace him with, or if they are. They don't have to. Obviously, maybe now they don't go specialization, and it's just more on Zach Alley. Big deal, little deal for you. No deal at all that this happened, that Larry Knight's there for 30-plus days and ends up now leaving to a bigger job. Do you need to have that be replaced? Can they just power through now this late going into the spring? Big deal or no deal to lose a coach before you even get to spring ball that you just recently hired a month and a half ago?
Well, I think for a position, I mean, it is kind of like not an assistant role. I don't want to say that, but I do think that, they made it through last season without that position. And granted, like you said, the pass rush is a position that they absolutely need to improve at.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think it is, at least you can kind of look at your hiring and be like, we had a guy
I was
who
going to say that's a
ended up
glass
going to
half full
Georgia for
statement. Yeah.
a few months. Like we got him at least,
Yeah.
I mean, I think you can, I think you can take some
Yeah.
pride in your hiring and your coach searching. But
Right.
I think that Zach, and with the defensive mind that they have in Zach Alley, I can't look at this kind of a position change and be like, this is a make or break thing to happen for the team. I think, would it help to have somebody who can specifically work in the pass rush? Absolutely. But, I definitely think that last year there was a lack of talent on the defensive line. I think that that was a problem. And, they still have time to probably sign somebody else coming into this year. They're going to have probably more bodies readily available. You have your roster more established than you did a
Yeah.
year ago. I think it's worth rolling the dice without that position. And I definitely don't think it's worth breaking the bank to bring anybody else into that position either.
Yeah. And really, in all reality, even though the program's definitely, bringing Rich Rod back to believe in him. And there's tons of reason to believe in Rich Rod. Obviously, I've written about this. I think he has a resume that's worthy of the College Football Hall of Fame if he gets the win percentage bar to be there. He's proven that he eventually wins everywhere he goes except for that Michigan experience. I do have reason to believe in Rich Rod as a coach. And anyone who's high on the West Virginia usually does lean on Rich Rod will figure it out. He's been there and done it before. I have reason to believe he'll figure it out. And they're certainly not going to be 4-8. Again, they had a lot of injuries. It was year one. It was horrendous. Yeah, in this era, year one, you can win right away. We've seen that at places. Of course, the national champion did that 2 years in, and they just had an historic run there at a non-traditional program with Cincinnati, Indiana. That's more still of a rarity than the norm. And you can throw all the injuries to year one. Year two, you got to be way better and you got to win more. It can't be 4-8 again, of course. There's pressure to have it be better. But this is not an indictment of Rich Rod at all. But you're going to win or lose in year two on the players, on the roster. The roster was flat out not good enough to withstand all the injuries they had in year one. And they can blame the fact that they got there late. They didn't have the intro presser until December 20th. Yeah, there were the 2 portal windows, including one after spring ball, but maybe they, gave up on too many guys too quick. And Zach Allis admitted this, that it's kind of like speed dating. You bring somebody in and you don't get to know them really well. You don't get to watch film too much. And they had to do that with an entire roster. Instead of 70% of it, it's the entire thing. And they didn't fall in love with too many players. They kind of took a chance on a lot of guys, hoping they would work out. And then they now admit that they didn't have a good enough team. They didn't hit on those players. And that's how the year was so bad. This year, off of transfer recruiting and certainly high school recruiting, they've done a much better job. And even who they brought in, Luke, they've been able to really vet them. So if they don't win, it's on them, and I'm sure they'll admit that. But this is not all on speed dating. They were able to bring in players that they could study the film. They could talk to them. They could do the Zooms. They could go in person. They could fully do it. I mean, let's be honest here. They knew pretty solid into the season 2025 is not going to be a trophy lifting year here. I'm sure they knew early on, maybe even after the Jaheim injury, certainly midway through, they knew it for sure. They already were recruiting, whether on Front Street or behind closed doors, to make the next year better in the middle of 2025, of course. So they were more ready for this than the year prior, when at that point they were still at their other jobs, certainly not recruiting for West Virginia 1 year ago before 2025. So they're better positioned, but they're going to win or lose off the players. They're not going to win or lose off even Rich Rod, as great as he is. And I think I'm kind of with you in the sense that if this year does not go well, I don't want to have anybody be like, you know what, it was going to go well, but Larry Knight was poached after 36 days. That is not going to be the thing to point to. That is not going to be the death nail by itself. It really probably will be a zero-sum factor. However, I'm not going to say it's no deal at all. I'll give it a little bit of a deal. Just because the pass rush was something they really need to improve upon. Having a position coach that specializes in that role, not even just the defensive line, but the pass rush in general, whether it be a linebacker or bandit, whatever you want to call them, a D-line, just on the pass rush, was going to be a major asset to the team. I don't think they should break the bank, but I actually would think that if they can, they maybe should try to replace that position, because clearly there's money for it. The money they were going to spend on Larry Knight, they're not spending now. So, Luke, I would either try to get another better player with that money or replace him. And you could call other coaches and be like, here's the money that was going to go to Larry. Do you want it for the pass rush? If they say, no, I want way more, you then certainly back away. I'm not saying break the bank, but I wouldn't be against replacing that position, because clearly that was what you figured out would be a benefit for you. And the glass half full take is what you said that I was going to bring up, that, one of the problems, again, with the Neil Brown era was many people believe, and I certainly agree with this in many respects, that Neil Brown was either too loyal to his guys for too freaking long, Jordan Leslie in particular, too long. They should have been removed earlier, and he would stick with them for too long. He'd pound on the table for coaches to go a whole nother year, and then that second year be worse than the year before that he was pounding on the table for them. And the entire staff was just guys from group of fives that were getting elevated for the most part. Rich Rod, yeah, he's loyal to his guys, and yes, there's some elevation there for sure. But you get Zach Elliott a year ago, and he needs to prove a lot too. I mean, the defense had some issues; they had their moments. They weren't great overall, though. Certainly, the defense wasn't nearly good enough. He needs to. I believe in him, but he needs to prove it. He can't have another bad year. But they did get him from Oklahoma. That's still something, even though he was a Rich Rod guy from prior to that. And the overall staff feels like they're more bought into him. They're more ready for this moment still. Nice Wander's even that guy that I really believe in as well. I think this staff does make sense and are right for the opportunities and for the job. Ryan Garrett's another young coach. I think this staff makes sense under Rich Rod. They're all bought in really to this hard edge way. And he's also clearly now willing to delegate. I mean, this is a little different Rich Rod than back when, he was there the first time where it was his way or the highway and it was just all on him. Yes, he's basically the offensive coordinator. There is no OC. That's one thing he's putting on him, but he knows the system better than anybody else. I get his son is there that maybe you could argue he doesn't deserve the job. But outside of that, I mean, he's hands in everything, but he's also really willing to delegate to Zach Alley defensively. He's really willing to trust him there. He's willing to delegate on the right spots. Maybe a weakness of his, he's willing to delegate. Okay, he's never had a great defense, you could argue. He's willing to delegate it to a young defensive mind. And he was willing to swallow his pride and say, we got to bring in somebody else for the pass rush. Luke, I would imagine Zach Alley had to swallow some pride for that too. They were willing to say, okay, we got to do this. Even if I want to be the guy and I want to handle that too, I'm going to let somebody else run it because it wasn't good enough in year one. And that guy's not there now. So I would replace that guy. You already decided that you need that guy. There got to be somebody else like Larry Knight that you can bring in. So I don't think it's the end of the world, but I think it's some deal. But yes, it's a positive that clearly, everything I'm saying is also supported by the fact that the guys that Rich Rodriguez is targeting to bring on his staff. Clearly, Luke, as you said, probably are the right guys to bring on a staff that needs to win in a hurry because Georgia wanted Larry Knight before he even coached a game at West Virginia, before they even saw the pass rush in the Big 12, and the man was from Arkansas State before. This is not like he was at Oklahoma like Zach Alley, then went to West Virginia, and then Zach Alley would get plucked. If Zach Alley would get plucked, okay, you can say he had a power job prior to West Virginia. He already proved himself there, even though that was roller coaster. There's reason to believe in him for a big-time job to steal him away. There might even have been part of Kirby Smart that's saying that if Rich Rod trusts the man, then I'm going to trust the man. I'm sure coach to coach, they respect each other. That is a little bit, I think, of a positive, that they're on the right track on who they should hire under Rich Rod if Georgia wanted to steal that man. And he is going home. He's just not going to any better job. But it is a better job, but not just any better job. It is going home. So I think that's a fair point that it's a little bit of a compliment to you. Like if you're in a relationship and you're dating somebody and somebody else steals that person away and you didn't want to break up, but now that person who you're dating decides I'm going to dump you and go with somebody else, it doesn't make you happy, but at minimum you're saying, well, who I was with was clearly coveted by others. Like, clearly others think this person's attractive. There's a reason why they want them. I wanted them, and they, Mike wants that person or Luke wants that person. Then hey, maybe I do too, and steal them away. So it doesn't make you, feel good. That's not good to lose somebody that way, but have them stolen from you. And it's a poaching. It's a stealing for Georgia. It's legal. It's not illegal what they did, but not even to get to spring ball does suck. You would like to have at least seen it in practice. They don't even care though. They think it's a good hire anyway, and they're going to take him. So that is a positive, and we will see if that gets replaced here, but who knows? Luke Blaine, Mike Osta here. That'll probably do it for this edition here of Mountaineer Report. Luke, do you have any final words on basketball, football, anything under the sun? Any you want to mention? The women's team, of course, they are certainly going to be in the tournament. We will cover them in some respects. The men's team is a question mark.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the men, well, the season ended today. The men would be in the exact same position they were last year, which is the 8th seed in the Big 12 tournament. They would play the winner between, I want to say, TCU and Utah. So, and then they would move on to, if they won that game, I want to say, top of the Big 12 right now, still Arizona. It's a tough stretch right now for WVU, and I think they're gonna need to count on winning some games and making their way up into the Big 12 tournament
Yeah.
standings.
Yeah.
But You still have 5 games before then to do what you need to do. But I will say, I do think it's looking pretty bleak right now.
Yeah, I'd imagine they're not going to get in this year. And again, even though it's a good year for year one, it's not the end of the world. It's not a really quote unquote bad year for me. I don't doesn't sound like it is for you either. It's a missed opportunity year for sure. They still have themselves to blame. This team, with as flawed as it is roster wise, Luke, probably still should have got in. Like, still should have
Yeah.
got in. With everything else said, still should have got in. Even with year one, if you want to call it year zero and you're with the program, okay, year zero, transfer chaos, drama the season before, inexperienced coach, team trying to gel, players didn't know each other, all of it. They still should have got in. They still had missed opportunities. They still should have been there. With all that said, so it's still a what if story. It's still a missed opportunity year, even if you don't want to say it a full on bad year. And I guess my last point that I just thought of that I did want to touch on, and we'll touch on this more on later shows as well when things are more decided and the year is officially over, and we'll see what their decision is here in this regard. And last year they said no. Do you think that the West Virginia Mountaineers, who do carry some, I mean, it's not a blue blood, but there's history there, of course, should accept an invitation to a postseason tournament that is not the NCAA tournament, whether that be the NIT or even play for the crown, which the Big 12 relationship is there. They likely would choose that if they got any other option outside the NCAA. Or should they say no and do the thing that other similar programs have even done and literally put out a press release that the standard of our program is the NCAAs. If we can't get there, we want to build for the future and we don't feel it's necessary to bog down in doing this tournament when we would rather recruit, etc. That's really what those programs are saying. Should they say yes or no to any postseason play that is not the NCAA?
I
For you.
would say leave it to the players. I do.
Okay.
I'm a fan of, I'm a fan of players getting to play as many games as, if the players want to keep going and
Yeah.
play through the NIT crown, whatever it may be, I don't have a problem with it. I think that, but also the portal windows are all messed up. So maybe you want to get after the portal earlier if you're the head coaching staff. And
Yeah.
because, you're definitely going to need to do some work in that respect going into this
Yeah.
season with as many players as you're losing, with losing all 5 starters. So maybe that's the move. Maybe going the other way is, I'm not sure. But I would say I would lean to letting the players play more. That is just my perspective on it, but yeah, I could see it either way.
Yeah, and I will try to play both sides of the fence here and kind of give the, I mean, I'm 10 years older than you. I'll give the older perspective because I know, and you've seen this too, this is what the millennial fan will say. I'm a millennial. This is what the millennial fan would say, that back in the day with John Beeline, which was even before my time, but back in the day with John Beeline, they felt they got snubbed. They were building something. He was young then. He was the up and coming coach. They said yes to the NIT and they won the damn thing and they got a banner for it. And no, it's not as big as the 42 one, which they claim was a natty. It's a little small one over in the corner. However, and it shouldn't be bigger than that, they then pivoted that to going to the Elite Eight during the Pick Snoggle time. And then, of course, after Beeline would choose to leave, they would eventually bring in Bob Huggins. We're only 3 years out, Luke, from the, and it's a different group of players, but from the NIT championship to the Final Four. That was a 3-year period. From 2007, they went to the Final Four in 2010, granted with a new coach. So there are going to be the millennial fan or older that will say there is a proof, granted 20 years ago, of playing for something can be better for the collective good and can be built to something else. But what I'm going to say here is then going to piss all those people off who will say that. That's a different era. This era is the transfer era. This era, you can't really do that. This is just a different era, like it or not. And I don't really love it either, but Ross Hodges even said, it's not for me to like. Tell me the rules. I got to play by them, and I got to figure it out within these rules. Now, the one rule he knows is the transfer portal will allow him to build back up a team when you lose that many seniors. And as you're saying, if you're going to be bogged down in the NIT or playing for the crown and you're out there in Vegas or whatever, and yeah, you're doing things by Zoom, but you're not doing anything on the recruiting trail. You're not in anybody's kitchen. You're not talking to anybody's parents, and you're focusing on hanging a little small banner up there and winning the program third NIT, if that means anything to you in this era, or the crown or whatever. And that is likely where they would be, by the way. It would probably not be the NIT. Is that better for the program? I mean, I just got finished saying that if they do not make the NCAA tournament in year 2, that is a gigantic problem, and it is a must make the tournament year. Not just want to, hope to. You got to make it year 2 if you don't make it year 1. It cannot be 4 or 5 years of not making it for this program. If that is the case, your number one order of business, if you miss this year, is to build the team back up, to recruit better, to make sure the offense is better, to maybe hire this offensive coordinator, to dip into the future and do high school recruiting well as well around Sadler, go into the portal, get some major conference players in addition to who else you want to elevate, and then do the damn thing again. That is a bigger priority than hanging a little small banner up in the corner. So that's the thing. Like, it's not 20 years ago. I get that'll be brought up no matter what you say. But you can't probably duplicate that. Like, if you go to the Final Four in 3 years and you win the NIT this year, there's really no way you can connect those dots. You're going to have all different players. Everything will be different. Even if the coach is the same, unlike before, everything will be different. Like, there'll be no way to connect that. So I would actually argue they should say no. What I think they'll do is they'll do what you said. They will leave it up to the players. I think, knowing Ross Hodge, they will leave it up, knowing the people there at WVU. They didn't go last year, but they knew they were losing a coach, and that would have been ridiculous. They had a lot of work to do in the offseason. This year, if at least you're staying the course with the head coach, you're staying the course with the staff, you maybe try to bring back some core bench players, and then you build around that. You already have your top 5-star high school recruit already signed. Like, you have some work done that was not done a year ago. You're further ahead now than you were a year ago going into year 1. Same thing with football. So maybe you can feel more comfortable of taking a week and a half for a minor tournament to play some more basketball. Because I think they should say no, and they should worry about the future. I don't think the small banner will mean anything, but I do think they'll leave it up to the players and even the departing players. I kind of get the drift. They may say they want to play together and they want to keep doing it. Because who among them are going to the NBA? Like, nobody. This is probably their best of days, even if they go play in Europe or play pro in some respect somewhere. They may want to keep doing this, especially if they lose out or have a bad taste in their mouth the end of the season after this Utah loss, if that really kills them. They may want to keep doing this. And I get Ross Hodges was in the NIT, and maybe he'll feel like I'm going to listen to players. They want to do it. I'll give him a week and a half, and we'll recruit around that. He just felt like he recruited for West Virginia while he was still coaching North Texas last year. Maybe he feels like he can do it again. I would say they should say no and worry about the future, because that's a bigger deal to you if you miss out the tournament this year. And there are similar programs to you. I also will add, Luke, and this will be my last point here. Perception matters, and it could look bad if you go. There are programs with a worse history than you that are flat out saying no to those tournaments. So if you say yes, that might make it like you're desperate for money, or I don't know why you would go. And maybe you are desperate for money, of course. You need more of it. But you're not in a I mean, there are, like Pitt, for example. They're in a horrible financial situation. They said no to it. They're not in any better financial situation than you, and they literally put out a press release. They were too good for this thing. Your history is better than theirs. It might look weird for you to go. But if the players want to go and you need the money, then okay, I could see them going. But yeah, building for the future is a bigger deal. So I would wonder what that decision will be. I didn't think they're going to have to make it prior to the Utah game, but now it looks like a decision they definitely will be having to make, because I am sure they're going to get an invite somewhere, if not the NCAA tournament. That'll do it for this edition of Mountaineer Report. Again, available everywhere you get your podcasts and throughout the West Virginia Sports Now network.